Russia's drone manufacturing network grew rapidly through 2024 to 2025, fueled by imported components, covert purchases, and aggressive industrial expansion. The crown jewel of this new empire was a sprawling $1.8 billion drone production complex located near Tula, an enormous steel and glass facility protected by layered air defense grids, jamming stations, and a perimeter Russia considered nearly impenetrable. But behind the polished propaganda, cracks were forming. Workers quietly complained about rushed assembly lines. Contractors missed deadlines. Engineers reported parts shortages that forced the factory to stockpile half-finished airframes. Even worse for Moscow, the rapid expansion created a fatal assumption that no Ukrainian strike could reach this far into the interior of Russia. This belief hardened into arrogance. Russian commanders reduced aerial patrols, shifted air defense units to more active sectors, and over-relied on a dozen outdated radars that had blind cones large enough to swallow entire drone formations. Ukraine's intelligence networks noticed. What Russia believed was its most protected facility was actually the one most vulnerable, because no one guarding it believed an attack was even possible. Weeks before the strike, a drip of scattered intelligence began to converge. Satellite passes detected unusual shipments arriving at the Tula facility, including Iranian microchips and composite materials crucial for Shahid-style drones. Human sources reported a sudden increase in night shift labor, usually a sign of accelerated wartime production. But the decisive breakthrough came from a previously unknown source, a mid-level contractor whose encrypted messages were intercepted during routine SIGINT operations. He described malfunctions in the air defense jamming arrays surrounding the plant. Those malfunctions created narrow but consistent windows in which incoming drones could pass undetected. Ukraine's intelligence teams cross-referenced these gaps with radar satellite imaging, discovering a pattern. Every 47 minutes, the array cycled into a reboot state that lasted 71 seconds. It was barely noticeable. But for a drone traveling at high altitude with minimal thermal output, it created the perfect entry corridor. Analysts built a full simulation. The window was real. And if exploited with precision, even Russia's prized factory could be hit. This wasn't just an opportunity, it was a moment Ukraine had been waiting for since the war began, a chance to strike deep into the heart of Russia's drone infrastructure. A deep strike nearly 400 kilometers into Russian territory required more than courage, it required engineering. Ukraine's drone teams began modifying a select group of long-range attack drones, enhancing their stealth features and drastically reducing acoustic signatures. Engineers coated airframes with a matte composite to scatter radar waves. Propulsion systems were altered to operate at lower heat thresholds. Every watt of emitted energy was measured and cut wherever possible. The flight path was equally brilliant. Instead of approaching directly, the drones would use the Earth's curvature and atmospheric layers to mask themselves. They ascended slowly, hugging a thermal inversion layer that reduced heat visibility. Then they descended sharply moments before entering the radar gap. To confuse Russian air defenses, Ukraine launched a decoy swarm, a noisy, obvious group of drones flying toward a different region. Radar operators reflexively shifted resources toward the false threat. Meanwhile, the real strike group flew in total radio silence across the night sky. Inside Ukraine's strike center, the room was quiet. The operation was so sensitive that only 9 officers knew the full plan. They weren't just attempting a long-range hit, they were rewriting the rules of drone warfare. If they succeeded, it would become one of the most significant behind-the-lines attacks in modern European conflict. At 2:18 a.m., the first Ukrainian drone entered the 71-second blind window. No alarm sounded. No radars registered the intrusion. Russian operators, distracted by the decoy swarm, never looked twice at the real threat slicing across the frozen darkness. At 2:21 a.m., the strike group descended, switching to final approach mode. Ukraine had equipped each drone with a precision fragmentation warhead designed to ignite composite materials and fuel reserves. The impact points were chosen to collapse the facility inward, not just damage equipment. At 2:23 a.m., the first explosion shattered the night. A fireball erupted from the center of the assembly wing, followed by a chain reaction of detonating lithium batteries and fuel canisters. In less than 14 seconds, the main production hall, nearly the length of 4 football fields, was engulfed in inferno. Russian guards panicked. Jamming towers blinked offline. 2 layers of air defense systems failed to activate because the strike zone was already burning by the time they detected anything. By 2:30 a.m., the $1.8 billion drone factory was no longer a factory, it was a silhouette of twisted metal glowing against the snow. Production capacity that took Russia 2 years to build had collapsed in 7 minutes. The Kremlin did not learn about the strike from its own military channels. It learned from the fireballs seen by local residents who flooded social media with videos before dawn. By the time the Ministry of Defense registered the event, hashtags declaring the Tula drone factory destroyed were already trending across Russian-language platforms. Panic moved upward through the command structure like an electric shock. The factory wasn't just another industrial asset, it was the centerpiece of Russia's drone strategy, the facility responsible for producing long-range Shahid variants, electronic warfare drones, and experimental high-altitude platforms. Losing it meant losing a year of battlefield momentum. Within hours, Russia initiated emergency protocols. Air defense systems were redeployed from Belgorod, Lipetsk, and even Kaliningrad, weakening other fronts, to protect remaining factories. Officers responsible for radar oversight faced internal investigations. The Kremlin summoned commanders to an unplanned night session, demanding explanations for how a strategically impossible strike had occurred. The panic spilled into propaganda. State media released contradictory statements, first denying the attack happened, then claiming minor damage, then blaming NATO for direct interference. But satellite images released by foreign analysts told a different story. The structure was gone, burned down to the concrete spine. Russia's retaliation was swift but unfocused. Hours after the strike, a barrage of missiles and drones targeted Ukrainian power stations and communication hubs. Yet the attacks felt desperate, not strategic. Most were intercepted. Ukraine's infrastructure absorbed the blow. Meanwhile, what Moscow feared most was unfolding quietly. Its frontline units reported immediate drone shortages. Reconnaissance flights were cut in half. Loitering munition missions stalled. Russian brigades that relied heavily on drone spotting suddenly went blind. The Tula strike didn't just destroy a building, it cracked the psychological armor of the Russian command, proving that even Moscow's deepest territory was vulnerable. The international reaction was immediate and intense. Western intelligence services privately celebrated what they called the most sophisticated deep strike of the war. NATO analysts noted that Ukraine had not only penetrated Russian airspace but had done so with an unprecedented level of precision, something previously believed to be possible only for superpowers with billion-dollar stealth programs. In Washington, senior defense officials briefed lawmakers in closed sessions, highlighting how the strike exposed systemic weaknesses in Russia's air defense architecture. The Pentagon described the operation as a masterclass in asymmetric warfare. European defense ministers, especially from the Baltics and Poland, used the moment to push for advanced drone production and deeper Ukrainian support. NATO intelligence agencies also noticed something else: Russia's immediate attempts to acquire large quantities of Iranian drone components. Satellite imagery showed cargo planes making urgent trips between Iran and Russian military bases. Analysts concluded that Moscow was attempting to compensate for the loss by accelerating foreign imports, proof of how severe the damage truly was. Global markets also responded. Defense stocks in drone manufacturing companies surged. Energy markets fluctuated as speculation grew about whether Russia would escalate in retaliation. Middle Eastern nations, especially Iran, monitored the aftermath closely, evaluating how Ukrainian tactics might expose their own military vulnerabilities. For Ukraine, the strike accomplished something beyond physical destruction: it reshaped the geopolitical narrative. It signaled that defensive warfare alone was over. Kyiv had demonstrated the ability to hit strategic, high-value sites with precision normally associated with elite Western militaries. The world took notice. Russia, cornered, now had to rethink the war not as a grind of attrition, but as a battlefield where Ukraine could reach deep into its core military infrastructure. The collapse of the drone factory wasn't just symbolic, it created a measurable tactical shift across the battlefield. On the Kupiansk-Kreminna axis, Russian artillery units reported significant delays in receiving drone-guided fire adjustments. Ukrainian forces exploited this by pushing forward under reduced surveillance. On the southern front near Robotyne, Russian reconnaissance units were suddenly forced to rely on older, shorter-range quadcopters with limited flight time and poor anti-jamming capabilities. Ukrainian brigades, using advanced Western-provided systems, gained dominance in aerial reconnaissance for the first time in months. Without steady drone supply, Russia's loitering munition strikes dropped noticeably. Units that once launched dozens of kamikaze drones per day were cut down to single digits. Ukrainian armored vehicles, previously hunted relentlessly from the sky, began moving with far greater freedom. The rhythm of the war changed. Ukrainian commanders responded aggressively. They initiated a series of coordinated assaults timed precisely with Russia's drone shortages. Night raids increased. Armored pushes became more daring. Small special forces units slipped behind Russian lines to target logistics hubs. But the most significant change was psychological. Ukrainian soldiers felt momentum returning, believing the deep strike proved Russia was no longer untouchable. Frontline morale spiked. Soldiers shared videos of the burning factory, treating it as a symbol of resilience and ingenuity. Meanwhile, Russian troops felt the opposite. Rumors spread rapidly across trenches: if a facility hundreds of kilometers inside Russia was obliterated, what else could be hit? Commanders struggled to keep discipline. Some conscripts refused to man frontline drone stations, terrified that their locations might be exposed next. The battlefield had shifted, not through brute force, but through the surgical removal of Russia's technological advantage. While the world focused on the burning remains of the Tula drone facility, a second battle was unfolding, one hidden behind firewalls, encrypted networks, and silent digital warfare. Cyber analysts in Kiev noticed a surge of probing attacks originating from Russian-linked servers. Moscow was attempting to map Ukrainian command systems, drone launch networks, and satellite communication nodes. But Ukraine wasn't passive. Its cyber units launched counter-operations designed to confuse Russian targeting systems, disrupt their electronic warfare signals, and feed false data into battlefield sensors. For the first time in the war, both nations engaged in a cyber duel directly linked to drone survivability and long-range strike accuracy. Behind closed doors, Ukrainian planners began modeling future deep strikes. If one factory could be hit using a 71-second radar gap, what other facilities had similar vulnerabilities? Satellite analysts began mapping Russia's entire drone production chain, from smaller assembly buildings to massive component warehouses. The Tula strike had proven the concept, it was now a question of scaling. Russia, meanwhile, scrambled to fortify its defenses. Emergency construction began on underground drone workshops. Air defense brigades were rotated to protect research facilities. Electronic warfare units attempted to plug radar holes, but the speed of Ukraine's evolving tactics made the job almost impossible. Both sides knew what was coming, a phase of the war dominated not by tanks or infantry, but by unseen algorithms, stealth drones, and silent cyber strikes. Ukraine's success had opened a new battlefield, one where distance no longer provided safety and technological innovation mattered more than territorial control. The Tula strike didn't end the war. But it changed its shape. It proved that Ukraine could strike deep, Russia could bleed far from the front, and the conflict's future would be defined by whoever mastered long-range precision, cyber warfare, and the intelligence race. For now, one truth stood above all: the war had entered a new era, and neither side could turn back.